Hey everyone. First of all, welcome. And as one of you saw in the video, we want to kick ass with this panel. We're very excited about that you're joining us. My name is Michael Fisk, and I'm co-founder of the Business of Creating Institute with my friend Jennifer Mangan, who will introduce very shortly. We started this about 9 years ago to make our creative community stronger. And we're so glad to see so many people here today watching this virtually. And we know that there's people, not just LA, New York, but even from around the world watching this. What we also want to do with Business of Creating is not only kind of empower and educate, but we're also about networking. And so part of the networking, which I know is a little harder when it comes down to, virtually, but what you can do is if you can, in the chat that you'll see on the bottom of your screen, if you can please type in your name and where you're from or location, introduce yourselves because this is all about networking and you might meet some people there that can help you with your projects. You might be able to help people with their projects. That's what this really is all about. So if you can introduce yourselves in the chat that you see there, and it should be to the right of participants, the left of raise hand on the bottom, please do so. Um, Instead of usually what we've done in the past when you do it in person, we go through details of what we are, but we played the video and we just wanted to do a shout out to Mitch Bradford, who helped put that together. Mitch and his team at Brand Your Story Online, who I think Dustin will kind of put the post in here. Definitely check them out. They did a phenomenal job and we're very, very thankful for them. And we rely upon a lot of people to volunteer their times to help us succeed here at the Business of Creating. Um, we are very, very fortunate also to have the partner of Writers Guild Foundation. We want to thank them for hosting us, and they've hosted us for many times over the years. And I'd like to introduce Dustin Fleischman, who is actually, the mastermind. He's like the Oz, behind it all, making sure it all happens, and everything from tech to making sure everything runs smoothly. We couldn't do it without him. But here's Dustin to kind of explain a little bit more about Writers Guild Foundation and leading up into the panel.
Well, thank you so much. I hope I'm not the Wizard of Oz. Isn't he kind of a criminal? That's fine. It's okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Dustin. I'm the Director of Events and Partnerships here at the Writers Guild Foundation. Thank you all so much for joining us for this event in partnership with Business of Creating. And also, thank you so much for your patience and understanding as we pivot to a virtual webinar while the WGA building is closed during the Writers Guild staff union strike. Just for clarity, the foundation is an independent nonprofit organization, and we are not a party to those negotiations. So while the building and library will remain closed until a resolution is reached, our services will continue remotely, and that, of course, includes this event. So before I turn it back over to Michael, I'd just love to share a little bit about the Writers Guild Foundation. So we are the nonprofit organization that is independent of but associated with the WGA. Our mission is to preserve and promote the craft of screenwriting, and we do that in a couple of ways. So we host public events, just like this one. All of our events are open to the public. You do not have to be a member of the WGA in order to register for any of our events. We also have community programs that help kickstart writers' careers, like the Veterans Writing Project, which is a year-long program for military veterans looking to break into the business. A Writers Access Support Staff Training Program, which offers underserved communities the opportunity to launch their careers as writers' assistants or script coordinators. We also have our public library, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. It is a screenwriting library that is on the corner of 3rd and Fairfax in the WGA building that houses tens of thousands of produced movies and TV show scripts that are available to read on site. Again, you don't have to be a member of the WGA in order to take advantage of those resources. We are open to the public by appointment only. Again, at the moment, the library is closed during the strike, but we will communicate with our membership and everyone over social media and our newsletters once we are able to reopen. So that is a little bit about the foundation. I'm going to throw a couple of links in the chat about the foundation, including information on how to subscribe to our newsletter and checking out our upcoming events. But yeah, please make sure if you haven't to subscribe to our free weekly newsletter, as subscribers are the first to learn about events like these and much more. Before I turn it back to Michael, I'm sure we're all very familiar with Zoom, but a couple of housekeeping notes. Number one is we do have the Q&A box open, which is separate from the chat. You can find the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you don't see it there, there's a button that should say more. It might be buried under the more button. please submit your answer or your questions to the Q&A box there. If you ask a question in the chat, there's a good chance that it's going to get lost and we won't be able to see it. So we'll keep track of questions that we'll answer during the Q&A portion towards the very end. At the same time, next to the Q&A button or somewhere on your Zoom toolbar, there should be a button to show captions. So closed captioning is available. If you need that, you can enable that by hitting that show captions button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Outside of that, I think you all know how to use Zoom. We've been doing it for 5 years. So I am going to turn it back to Michael. Again, thank you so much for your partnership, Michael. Really can't do this without you.
No, thank you so much, Dustin. And first of all, I'm so glad people are chatting already in the chat room. It's good to see people like Rudy. Hi, Rudy. Hey, Mitch. I'm glad Mitch is here. Um, so if we can, Dustin, can we pull up the screen? I just wanted to just talk just a little bit of why we're doing this panel because there's so much anxiety right now in our business, especially for independent producers, which is why Jen and I wanted to put this panel together. And what we really want to do is kind of look at it on a positive side because, I've seen this consolidation where you've seen Disney acquire Fox and Amazon acquire MGM, Skydance acquiring Paramount. Then you have Netflix, Paramount, what's going on, and dear friends of mine at Paramount, Netflix, Warner Brothers. It's like I'm always thinking of them, and worrying about them, particularly with these changes that are so much in the media. And I've actually, for better or worse, been, working at some of these studios when it happened. The first time when I was at MGM, it was being acquired by Sony when I was in the 2000s, early 2000s, then MGM again by Amazon. As independent, creators and filmmakers, it definitely this time feels makes us feel uncertain, but it's really interesting. Like even like to me, like last year just sucked. 2025 was just sucked, but the start of this year was really interesting, and I'm seeing this kind of shift. And I consider this really like, particularly talking to a lot of independent producers, this it's actually a wonderful time, and I see it really as this really this Cambrian explosion of independent creativity that's happening even among this chaos. It's everything, and we're going to be talking about this in the panel between new distribution models from verticals to AI production tools to reverse engineering, financing, kind of like the rule book for creators is getting their content made is being kind of rewritten at real time right now. And Dustin, if we can go to the next slide, and just kind of just shout out to actually one of our panelists for basically saying this, and then we'll kind of do some introductions. But we're seeing in the media a lot of the studio consolidation, and as Allison is saying, is like it isn't the end of independent film, and it's not like how do we survive without them, which are those really smart. It's how do we design a system where we don't depend on them in the first place, because the majority of the stuff is happening in the independent world. So with that, we're going to start the panel. And to start the panel properly, the best person can do it is Jennifer Mangan, my partner in crime, the co-founder of Business of Creating. And just a quick intro on Jen. She's a writer-producer who owns her own production company, Beautiful Day Productions, which, by the way, I love the positivity in the name. And it focuses on material that uplifts and empowers women through comedy and sci-fi. She's currently has a sci-fi fantasy TV show, Animal Magnetism, in development, so keep an eye out for that. After graduating from distinction from UCLA Extension in Business and Management, she co-founded and produced Women in Film Mini Upfronts, which promotes female content creators via red carpet industry screenings of trailers and sizzles for unproduced projects. And that's how we actually got to meet because she invited me to be a juror on that, which I was forever thankful. Recognizing the need for creatives to gain practical advice and guidance from seasoned entertainment execs in order to market and sell their projects, Jen co-founded, produces, and moderates the Business of Creating. Previous to this, she acted in and directed theater shows in Germany and did voiceovers in the UK. She graduated cum laude from Santa Clara University with degrees in theater and German, and she is also a proud member of SAG-AFTRA and Second City. So with that, welcome, Jennifer.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. I was checking in the chat. I was getting all excited with what everybody was saying there. So we have 115 people with this right now. I am loving this. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am the most fortunate person here tonight because I get to ask the questions of these incredible panelists. First up, we have a film and television executive and producer at veteran studio head Rob Friedman's Ascendant Entertainment. This is the amazing Allison Lonnie Janae. Everyone, prior to joining Ascendant, hey,
Hi,
prior to
hi.
joining Ascendant, Allison served as a creative executive at Fisher Stevens Insurgent Media. Earlier in her career, she developed and produced music video content at Moving Box Studios for artists including the Chainsmokers, Tiesto, and Galantis. Before moving behind the camera, Allison built a background as a performer in regional theater, commercials, film, and television, and an experience that continues to inform her collaborative, creator-first approach to development. Everybody, a warm welcome for Allison Lonnie Janae.
Hi, gang.
Hey,
Glad to be here.
virtual,
Virtual, hey.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, joining us tonight, the amazing Steve Siskind. Steve is an accomplished entertainment marketing executive who helped shape many of the most memorable, profitable, and award-winning film campaigns of the past 25 years at 20th Century Fox and Paramount Pictures. At Fox, he led theatrical media, creative content, synergy, and research, building integrated, data-driven strategies that supported over 150 wide releases. Now, at Paramount, Siskind expanded his scope to international media oversight before serving as president of domestic theatrical marketing and later president of worldwide home media marketing. In these roles, he oversaw high-impact launches for tentpole franchises and prestige films, including such fun titles as Transformers, Mission Impossible, Kung Fu Panda, and Interstellar, maximizing life cycle title profitability. I'm so excited I stumbled, y'all. Profitability while consistently creating mutual value with outside partners. Post-Paramount, Steve transitioned into advisory and transformation work, counseling content producers and SaaS providers on marketplace strategy, AI research, and digital creative optimization. He lectures and writes on streaming and theatrical models, advertising effectiveness, and emerging insight generation technologies with clients that include management consultants, Wall Street investors, and MBA programs at UCLA and Oxford. Since 2022, Steve has served full-time at EDO Incorporated, overseeing analytics for the entertainment sector and leading efforts to measure incremental advertising lift using search behavior and outcome-based metrics, helping studios directly connect spending to audience impact. Everybody, let's give it up for Steve. Hey, Steve.
Thank you for having me here today, and I'll make the intro shorter next time if it's going to bed.
I'm having to scroll through pages, you guys. I'm loving it. And that's on font 12. So it's, that's how much these people have done. Ladies and gentlemen, continuing the amazingness, it's Sterling Milan. Sterling is a visionary executive producer and director at the forefront of modern media, currently producing major documentary and branded slates for Amazon and PBS, as the co-founder of Seen and Held, a booming production venture launched with acclaimed partner Shayla Milan. They recently launched The Science of Music, a landmark achievement at PBS's first ever interactive app-based television experience. Previously, Sterling served as the head of content for Will Smith's Westbrook Media, spearheading global hits like National Geographic's Welcome to Earth and the viral sensation Ryan Doesn't Know. A pioneer of the metaverse era, Milan executive produced Post Malone's 12 Carat Toothache VR experience and directed Shaquille O'Neal's Shaqtacular New Year's Eve for Meta, setting the gold standard for virtual entertainment. With over 2 decades of industry leadership, Sterling remains the go-to visionary for brands and networks looking to capture the zeitgeist, proving that the most resonant storytelling lives at the intersection of technical precision and undeniable cultural influence. Hey, Sterling! Oh, I'm seeing all these wonderful hand claps in the chat, everybody. Love it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, last but definitely not least, it's my partner in crime, Michael.
Hey.
Michael, of course, is the co-founder with me of the Business of Creating Institute. He is a producer and founder of Pangram Entertainment, where he works on major international film projects, including Ferrari, directed by Michael Mann. His producing credits also include the TIFF Festival premiere horror comedy Ick, produced by Steven Schneider and starring Brandon Ruth and Mina Suvari. He began his career in the dot-com startup world before moving deeper into entertainment. As such, he is the co-founder of two tech meets entertainment startups, Calendar Group, which is the first global registry of sports AI IP, and Fumoro, a creator-facing platform, the creators universe, where creators create and fans expand. Now, before all of these things, Michael was a senior executive in the entertainment industry, having spearheaded over 500 campaigns for studios like Sony Pictures, Lionsgate, NBC Universal, Warner Brothers, and MGM Amazon. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody, warm welcome for all these amazing panelists. Holy
Thank you,
cow, I hope you
Jen. Thank
guys
you.
I hope you guys got your notepads and pencils and all that good stuff ready to go, because tonight we are going to be on fire, everybody. I can't wait to learn from all you guys. Okay, move
If
the slide.
Dustin, hey, Dustin. Yeah,
Okay, Steve, tell me more about Iron Lung.
Yeah, when I was invited to this and talk about independent film, I was trying to think, would there be something topical? And then the next week, out of seemingly nowhere, comes Iron Lung. Iron Lung is the type of film that comes in the independent world, I'd say, once a decade, and everybody studies it for weeks afterwards and tries to figure out why they didn't know about it 6 months before your company included here. The reason it was so special was the creator, Markiplier, who has 38 million followers on YouTube, came up with the idea of approaching the game maker, David Szymanski, and said he was going to make a film that he would write, direct, produce, star in, and that he would get it into theaters, which is the goal of a lot of the people here today, and a big dream. And he had some really smart ideas behind it, which was starting with a popular indie horror game. But what he really had behind it was a belief of that this was something where if you kept it to what the game was, instead of what Hollywood all too often does, which says, well, to be in theaters, a game can't be the same way it is. That audience isn't big enough. That is too intense. But he actually kept all the elements of the claustrophobic attitude of it and the horror that he bragged one of his first posts when he was making the film that there would be the most fake blood ever. And that to me is being authentic. And that's when you start to see that people were relating to him and thinking this wasn't a Hollywood guy in the gamer community, this was our guy. He made the movie for $4 million and self-financed it, which is both an act of confidence and an act of amazing return on investment, as you'll see later, when you make 50 million worldwide and 41 million of that coming from the US. What's most impressive about this 4,000 screen opening, including 3,000 in the US, is I'm seeing people saw in the dailies and otherwise they knew it was going to be a hit. But what's most impressive is the theater owners don't. They're not in that demographic. And that's what makes this so interesting. I was talking to a friend today that I said, well, I worked on Paranormal Activity, and we were the first ones to say demand it. And by demand it, we took a film, Paranormal Activity, that had played at Slam Dance at Sundance and said, you know what, we're going to put it in theaters. And then when it didn't look like we were going to get a wide release, we told audiences, if the theater near you isn't playing it, go ahead and demand it. And that's how Paranormal became eventually a film that was making $100 million and had 7 sequels and broke through because of Demanded. And when I said this to my friend, I said, Iron Lung stole it from us. He said, well, you stole it from I Want My MTV. That's when I realized today that every generation has the same idea, which is why I was happy to speak tonight, which is no matter whether you have IP that already exists in another form or another idea, the only way to make theater owners, who by and large are going to be over 50 years old and possibly not gamers or horror fans or something else, is for them to see audiences demand it. And that's what everybody responds to. And that's where the best marketing comes from, is a sense that audiences are talking to you. And what I found unique about this was they didn't demand it once, they demanded it 7 times. The movie, was able to be booked at all because fans responded when he said, I'm making it, when he talked about the shooting of it, when he talked about the fake blood. He had a charity donate blood, and there was 37,000 different people donated blood as a result of that. So I'll tell you that the idea of doing an impactful charity at the same time gets attention, but really is he went to these 38 million people 6 times or 7 times, as I said. They first got it in some theaters, and then they got it more. And then he said, watch the trailer and comment on the trailer, because theater owners will see that. And then he says, go ahead and buy advance tickets. And then studios were all of a sudden figuring out maybe there's something there, at which point he knew he wanted it by himself, that he could make this happen. But then he went to them and said, okay, it looks like we're going to make $7 million based on the advance tickets. Prove those people wrong. Go all through the weekend. And it ended up at $18 million, which was shocking for even those projecting big. And then everyone said, well, that's fine. The next week we'll fall off and drop 75%. He got everybody. And instead it held on to, did a 2.5 multiple. And as I said, we'll get over $40 million. So this case study is history repeating itself with people demanding what they want. But most of all, it's a confident person who said, if I can get people to feel that they're A, standing up for me, B, bucking the system, and C, getting the kind of authenticity that made them attracted to it in another medium, you can break through and do 3 or 4 times what some very expensive films did in that same period. And you can do it. You don't need Rotten Tomatoes, which was 60. You don't need, you don't need the studio's blessing or for them to even understand how big you are. You're your own person and your own gut. And this is a great example.
Can I just say, Steve, what I really like about this too is, you mentioned it's like, people think, oh, this is kind of new, but it really, and we're going to be talking about it further in some other case studies, just about like how some of the stuff that has worked in the past actually can work now, in this changing environment. And the wonderful thing, what I really love about Iron Lung, what Markiplier has done is that, I mean, first of all, it is incredible that he wrote, directed, acted, financed. I mean, it was this, almost like a one person shop, but really was like using early on from the beginning, is getting the audiences involved, getting his fans involved, and it wasn't like he tried to make it and then says, okay, now I'll do it. It was actually he was including people as part of the entire process. Now a lot of independent creators are going to say, well, I don't have 38 million subscribers, right? God, I'm lucky if I have 38 friends who follow me, on that, but I think what people can say, well, that's the only reason why, but it's like, no, he actually thought about like, what I mean, 50 million, that's a lightning in a bottle, but that he actually did it for such cheap, for 4 million, and would, successfully even just at 4 or 5 million, was able to do it. But using all those things you were talking about, Steve, was really critical, for an independent producer, and didn't go through the traditional route.
Yeah, 3 things. Somebody's talking about Billy Jack in the 70s doing the same thing. And yes, every decade has one. 2 is he was smart enough to put the creator of the game in as a cameo and talked about that. And the guy who did the music scoring had never scored a film before. So what was so cool is normally you go through a studio and they'll be, this is fine, but make sure you have a cameo by Matt Damon in there to make it work. And when Matt Damon made his movie, they said it's fine, but make sure you have Robin Williams. But he just stuck to, the people he knew, which is part why he made it work for 4 million. And then the last thing I want to say about it is it's not having 38 million. It's having the right passion among them. It's 38 million people didn't buy tickets unless they only paid $1 each, you know. It's getting the right 3 million, and everyone will get it wrong when they just look at how many followers you have. It's how far those followers will follow you and deliver for you.
Thank you. Amazing info, you guys. I'm writing things down and I'm also Gesundheit, checking in the chat at the same time, multitasking. So thank you, you guys. Okay, cool. Next slide, please. Dustin.
Dustin, I know, hey, Dustin. No, is it if we can go to the other one, if we can get yeah, if we can get perfect.
All right, so the reverse engineering case study. What are we talking about with reverse engineering, you guys? I thought this was a
Yeah, we
writing and producing seminar here. We're talking engineering. What? Tell me more, Sterling. What's happening with the reverse engineering?
You know, well, first, I just want to say I love so much of what Steve said, as it also connects the dots here to, this slide. Reverse engineering, which of course is a buzzword that I brought up on our phone call that we had originally. Guys, what Steve is saying is the case study here is about being the Hollywood disruptor, right? And finding the type of projects, right? The Iron Lung is a good example. Um, the kind of projects that really buck against the Hollywood system, right? Because when you have a consistency of the same kind of stories time and time again, people begin to, of course, naturally lose interest in seeing those same stories repeat themselves. So the audience begins to look for something fresh and unique. However, when the audience makes that transition to something that's fresh and unique, most studios haven't arrived there yet. They're still plugged into what generates revenue based on the years before. So they're not always attuned to how things shift and how things move. That's where the independent circuit really thrives, right? Because that allows all of us who are independent creators and filmmakers to essentially exist and thrive in a very, very vibrant zone that always becomes the next trending thing. However, getting your project to be seen and recognized and noticed takes a lot more creativity on your own behalf to try and get it made and get it done, right? Um, I think the Iron Lung is a really wonderful example of that very thing, in terms of being a disruptor, in terms of how you approach, creating something. Um, in my experience, in my recent years, in my recent understanding, and trying to be a disruptor of my own, um, generally what happens is the marketplace is flooded with a ton of ideas, right? Everybody has a lot of ideas. There's a million ideas right now in the chat. Everybody is walking around with this amazing Hollywood idea. However, as the times are shifting, like Michael said, last year sucked, the same amount of money that was once being spent on these ideas is not being spent anymore. Um, Most places that will invest in movies and projects they're going to want something that they know is going to have a hit or going to have an attached talent or the story time and time again. So you have to think to yourself, okay, well, great, what else can I do? In my case, what I began to recognize is yes, we do have all of these different outliers and buyers and places you can land programming on these days. I began to target those places before I went after trying and getting financiers or investors from a project because I realized that the market was flooded and I really couldn't get that far going that route. So my route that I chose was to try and get distribution first, right? So that's what I meant by reverse engineering. So the first thing that I went for was to get distribution before I went after with all my projects. Because I realized in the coffee shop conversations that I was having was that everyone talked about the ideas they wanted to do, but no one really talked about distribution. And then when I did several rounds of financing for a previous film, I found that when we had the talent, when we had the team, when we had the packaging, we had all the things, there was still this hesitancy to kind of get behind the project. even with all the shiny bells and whistles you had going for yourself, because there was really no surefire way to understand how the investment would come back. Right? There's in the film business, there's always this happy-go-lucky, well, yeah, sure, the idea sounds great, but at the end of the day, it's still a business. And most people want their money back. Going after a distribution deal first was the only way that I could begin to ensure that I can create some back end on my projects. Once I got a distribution deal in place, and I'll kind of go into that a little bit later on too, then I was able to kind of go back to those investors with those ideas and those directors and those producers out there that had those ideas. And I was able to say, well, listen, this project here is a really good fit for this network that I've already gotten a deal with. What we can do is we can try and see if we can find some alignment with your project on this network, on this platform. They'll probably agree to a certain number for this film. Then we'll kind of go back, and then all of those investors and all those people that wanted to invest were kind of on the hook. Then they might come on board now because now we have some security attached, we have some distribution attached to it. So that was the way that I found stability for myself in the past few years of a volatile film industry. Um, to put things into like, names on things and dollar amounts on things, because I think that'll be helpful. Um, Basically about 3 years ago, I was just like anyone else here, where, I had an amazing, executive job, at a very great place. And then as the industry shifted, I found myself having to, look for a job during a time when the jobs just weren't looking for me. So that forced me to kind of, go up the ladder and see what else I can find and create. And I just happened to have a relationship at PBS around that time. And, one phone call led to another phone call. And remember that I was at the time really trying to push narrative, movies. Generally, narrative movies take roughly about a 3-year window to get off the ground from scripting to, first shot, generally. But documentaries move quite a bit faster and have much lower overhead. So I just happened to pitch a couple of documentary ideas that I had in my mind. 6 months later, two of those documentary ideas sold and to PBS, and they were great. They had a premiere, they were really amazing. That led to a third. That led to a distribution deal, which, of course, if we all notice what happened in the media recently with PBS and NPR and the funding, their in an effort for them to survive, they end up partnering with Amazon and moving a lot of their IP behind a paywall on Amazon, which essentially grandfathered me into a larger deal with Amazon now. So, and that deal ended up becoming quite, in my opinion, quite lucrative because it gives me an ownership share of the products that I can now put out, which is something that I just wasn't getting when I was a producer selling to Netflix and, when I was on the outside selling to Amazon. So now I have an ownership share in the products now, which means that I have an attachment to the longevity of the money and the finances, for a lifetime, which is, unheard of, if essentially. So I think finding that back door and then working my way in through the back door was the way that I kind of, disrupted the studio model chain of how things are done. And it's a bit more gritty. It's a bit more we talk about independent filmmaking and it's still me wearing all the hats and doing all the jobs, right? And the reasoning for that is because, at the end of the day, there's not many people that are going to really, really understand and know the idea like you do. Just like any filmmaker walking in the door trying to get, someone to adopt their project, you're the number one source of believability, and you're the one that's got to carry that project in the door and out the door all the way through. So yeah, that's why I'm wearing all the hats to get it done. Um, Lastly, Steve made me think of another industry disruptor from the 70s, another black filmmaker who was a comedian, Dolomite. Dolomite fought hard to get his movie made, and he did it himself with, some stolen money. But later on, Eddie Murphy picked it up and put it on Netflix, and it's still a great film. So, hey, man, you gotta be a disruptor to get it done,
Absolutely. Sterling, we had a couple of questions here in the chat. So Carolyn is asking, how do you get distribution first if you don't have a solid track record like all y'all awesome people have?
Oh, that's okay. So here's the deal. It's
I
actually
think
easier
I think
now.
everybody will take the deal, Sterling. Done.
It, I think now what's okay, so there's so many different avenues for content and for media and for purchasing and for buying, and they're not always getting all the great ideas. So I would recommend aim at that low-hanging fruit, those easy startup companies that just want to get in the game of content. Because if they're buying things, they're not going to be able to buy from the person that has a ton of $10 million projects. They're looking to spend $50,000 or $125,000 on something. That's where you want to get in the door, and you can start that with a cold call, a cold email, and you'd be surprised how far that would go. And if you stick to it and you consistently annoyingly email, you most likely will get a call. If you can get just one of those companies to say, yes, we'll air your product, I guarantee you can find some gap financing from someone, from some investor who wants to get in, who thinks you might be the next big thing.
Now, to get, I'm reading, loving all of this. But so people are saying, hey, can you give us, some of the companies' names? Or we have
Uh,
some resources at the end, which will probably help guide people on that. But Sterling and Allison and Steve and Michael, everybody, because we're all doing a lot of that same one-man bandness, which I love to hear you guys saying that you're doing it too, because I know everybody's going, oh, I'm doing everything. Yes, we all are. Congratulations. Have some coffee. But so, right? Y'all think this is just water. No, just kidding. But so, what resources are you guys using then to jump around a little bit to find some of these lower hanging fruit places to call?
All right, so I think a couple things for me. I listen a lot to new things happening in the trades, right? For example, I'll give anyone here some free anything if you want. Currently, right now, if you think outside of America, right, think larger for the global population of the world that consumes content. One of the biggest things in Korea is, of course, micro shorts, right? They're films that are shot in 9 by 16 that can be consumed on your phone, and they're roughly about 6 to 10 minutes long. They're action packed. They're budgeted well, like an actual TV drama. Now they're circulating that same IP, that same industry to America and trying to create, business in America. That's a really good opportunity to kind of jump in and get a narrative piece made, quite easily right there. Again, looking down the line too. I know there's a lot of apathy towards going after Tubi, but Tubi is a great landing place that does have financing and backing to take it further. Additionally, for those that are really, really creative and you really got your eyes open, those of us that travel, and if you ever end up in a hotel and you're on that hotel TV and that first landing that's showing you all the various like hotel and city kind of content is actually a buyer for content. And they have quite a nice amount of bread too to purchase things. And so, these are all ways that I kind of look at things. I have an internal list that I don't know if I can share it all right now, but I'd be happy to share it afterwards in terms of like the companies that I've been kind of liaising with and talking with. They aren't all domestic companies. Some of them are also international companies too, because in the international foreign markets, a lot of for those that do documentary work, for those that do historical documentary work, there is an unbelievable marketplace internationally for American historical documentaries that are factual and true. So yeah, always know that.
Yeah, that's something you wouldn't even think to consider. Well, I'm doing something on the civil rights movement, Sterling, and yeah, why would I think to go to Korea or wherever? I would think just go locally. So I think that's an excellent tip. Thank you.
Right.
Let me see, Allison, I want to jump you into the conversation a bit more. As far as the
Oh,
Japanese anime case
oh yeah.
study, no, I
Yeah,
was gonna
I'll do that.
say,
I'll touch that one really quickly. This one just so you know, this is just following up with what Sterling had to say. Is it's when we say reverse engineering, people are always thinking linearly, like, oh, you have a script and I have to sell it, right? And the key thing here is Japan, just so you know, in anime, and this is something for that you're seeing happening more in North America and the US, is that 90% of all the anime productions are done by an anime committee. And it really starts off with a publisher, but they don't even really begin. They to what Sterling's saying on distribution, if you're able to kind of get distribution, that helps out. But they also think even beyond that. They're thinking, oh, maybe there's a music company, they sell off the music rights exclusively, a game company to do the video gaming rights exclusively. Granted, it helps to have an IP that helps out with it or for any merchant licensing. But what they're looking at it is like, look, instead of making a product and then everything follows, they actually kind of pull it up front, get the money, and figure out what is there, and then that's how they package it. And one of the things I'm executive producing on right now is an animation in Southeast Asia. And we are talking about having a game made, even though we haven't gotten into production, because A, you might have a game maker willing to put up the money in advance, right? And that's kind of helps with financing, that helps getting things started. So it's more of just that type of thinking that's what you're kind of like this kind of reverse engineering, and even Japan is trying, they're trying to do reverse engineering because they're looking at it as like, oh, their hybrid model is how do they go to non-Japanese companies? Like Sterling, you're talking about thinking outside the US, right? Which I was so glad you brought that up because I think that's something also for independents to think about. Like, okay, who has financing, who has distribution, who has certain like games or music, whatever it is, rights that they would be interested in on it, get them on it early on to help kind of package it and do the financing and get the project going. So anyway, Jen, I'll just want to jump in on that one, but if we could go into Ali, that would be perfect because I think there's like a really, really fun case study here.
absolutely coming up. So, yeah, as we've all been kind of saying, hey, we think this is brand new, but dun dun dun, what would Roger Corman do?
Yeah,
Allie,
so
tell me more.
looking backward to look forward a bit, Roger Corman was the king of the B movies, as you can see, and he did hundreds of movies throughout his career. I think between the time he was 25 and 35 years old, he directed and produced over 100 movies, so that's 10 a year. And he did that by you know, basically asking three questions. And the first is, what can I make quickly? What can I make cheaply? And what does my audience want? How can I serve the existing audience? And so generally, I mean, he was known for shooting films in 10 days. Basically, every A-list director we know now came up through the proving ground that was working with Roger Corman. And he would famously say, once you've worked with me, you'll have the pleasure of never having to work with me again, meaning that they would be launched in their careers. So the faster that you can get something done, you can execute, you can learn from it, and then you can regroup, recoup your money, and do it again. Um, and that speed creates market agility, it creates career agility and momentum. And then ask yourself, what can I make cheaply? What do you control? Do you have a bunch of friends who are actors? Did you go to Chapman and you have access to an Alexa that you can rent on the weekend? Does your mother-in-law have a beautiful house in Malibu that you guys can shoot in for a week? I mean, anything that you can do on the cheap, absolutely do, because waiting around in this kind of environment is it's just never, your ticket's never going to come up. And so I love that in moments of consolidation, not waiting, taking the bull by the horns, doing what you can, and actually getting the thing done and getting it out there and then doing it again. That's the name of the game. Um, so also in terms of, how cheaply can you make something, asking yourself, how many hats can I reasonably wear? Am I willing to work for free? And for how long? Corman famously, to get his first producer credit, did it for free. Granted, he was in his 20s. I am no longer. You may be anywhere in between. But I think you ask yourself, am I willing or am I unwilling? And if you're willing, then do it. Um, Also, chasing the right actors, the right collaborators for a film who really get it, the right directors. They aren't necessarily names. And I think what we've been seeing more and more coming back from these markets and festivals is that the names that used to command, major international sales money, it's getting to be less and less and less. And we see how what a behemoth YouTube has become and these creators as to Markiplier and Steve's case study is that the audience is kind of is found their unique niches, and I don't know how much longer the star economy will sustain itself. And so there's an opportunity there, and that is to find amazing actors and take chances on new filmmakers. So chasing execution, not heat, small budgets, embrace small cast sizes. These kind of limitations gave people like Roger Corman creativity. That's when you do your best work sometimes. And then ask yourself, do I have something to contribute to the genre audience? Because those horror audiences, the psychological thriller, contained thriller, they show up. And if you give them something interesting to talk about on Reddit or word of mouth, then, as with the Markiplier case study, you don't need a big P&A spend. You don't need a whole bunch of marketing. You have the power that is word of mouth and audiences coming to show up. Um, and as much as you can, Corman knew his audience before filming. He knew what to serve them. He knew what would be commercial, like it or hate it, call it a B movie if you will. But he knew what they wanted and he gave it to them. And he gave it to them over and over and over again. And you can test your audience beforehand, you know, building your own brand, utilizing blogs, the Substack community, podcasts, streams, serials. You can focus group your audience demand and see what it is that they want real time in public, test the tone, test the concept, test their appetite. And you can even test their willingness to pay a little bit, like if you have a Substack community or you're a streamer, you don't have to be like Markiplier, but you can test what people want.
Boy, I love how you are showing us, everybody here is showing us really, hey, this is doable, as long as you're willing to strap the cymbals to your knees and, bang the drum at the same time with the hands and what have you, as long as you're willing to put in the work. And hey, it's a lot of work, y'all. Okay, well, we know that. But it's refreshing to hear that it's reminding us that it's doable and that even for people, no matter what level of experience you're at, it's a lot of work is a lot of work. So, but all right, this is what you love. So go on and do it and make your dream come true. All right, guys, let's continue on. Think like a hedge fund. Okay, wait, we were doing engineering, then we were supposed to be doing some entertainment stuff, and now suddenly I gotta be hedge fund manager. All right,
Just
are we
one
doing
one more
insurance
point
next?
about Roger Corman before we go on,
Please.
which is I love the history lesson, and I think Allison alluded to people came out of that system, but Jack Nicholson could not get a job outside of Roger Corman for 6 years, and that's the factory that he learned. And Ron Howard, when he wanted to make a film and come from Happy Days, he went there. And to me, the idea that this has been going on then, it was the 60s were a time when people were going bankrupt, making big musicals, and nobody felt the studios were going to survive. And whether it was, Sound of Music or Cleopatra, the big studios were going boom or bust. And he said, let's go back to what they were doing in the 40s, where you had a Western every single week and you had a love story every single week. So now when people are afraid of the $200 million movies, I think what Allison says is, when they go high in price, let's go low, because people are looking for a steady supply of movies at a lower rate more than ever, because that's the one thing that you can get somebody to say yes to. And it's whether it's theaters, whether it's partners, especially if you have a cause movie and you're doing some of the types of films Sterling was talking about, either in documentary or history form. You find people want that and the theaters want that as a counter programming to the 20 big bets a year that are filling everyone with trepidation.
Love it, you guys. Thank you. Some people are putting in the chat that they're like, well, how did, it seems like things are kind of on recycle, as far as it goes.
Yeah.
Eh, yes, yes, they are. Well done pointing that out, team.
There's nothing new under the sun.
All right. Hey, you guys, let's check out the next slide. I want to know about hedge funds now all of a sudden. Why am I doing financing tonight? What's happening here?
It's a decent way of thinking about how to build your slate and how to build your business. And basically, your goal is absolute return, as the finance pros like to call it. It's basically you're hedged. You have bonds, you have stocks, you have growth, you have all a mix of assets, basically, that look at your slate as a mix of different assets. And whether the market rises or it falls, whether the studios consolidate or not, you make money ultimately because you have all different risk profiles, you have multiple different projects in terms of genre, in terms of talent, in terms of, so you're looking to mix um, also projects that are at different stages. Some are more early development, some are maybe in pre-production, some are in production. And so the idea is if anybody's had the joy of waiting tables as I have, you will know that it's much easier when you have somebody sit down, somebody's eating their meal, somebody needs dessert, somebody needs the check, rather than everybody sitting down and everybody getting up all at once, then your life is going to be miserable. And then also thinking in terms of your diversified portfolio management that you're building for your audience and for different niche audience, not for mandates, because similar to the Corman example, the pendulum swings back and forth. Everybody wants dad TV. Now everybody wants romance and everybody wants, soap, and then everybody wants something else. And if you're constantly chasing what everybody wants, chances are they're not going to want that anymore. So definitely having a mix of different things and all things that speak to you ultimately. If you're a writer, maybe you don't write everything. Maybe you come on as a producer in a different capacity. It's just thinking about things as a business and as your assets. And then another big piece is risk mitigation. And so think about how you can partner with people strategically. Sterling spoke to that. Cross-sector collaboration, whether there is another industry that, even the hotel video, I mean, that was incredible. Um, you can also do nominal paid drops. So whether it's on YouTube, whether it's using a platform like Substack, if you can prove that your audience is willing to pay a little bit for something, then chances are, like Markiplier, they might be willing to show up for you when you're come to a theater or do like a mini theatrical release. And then finally, think about your distribution and buyer strategy from day one, not when you're already in the can and you need to recoup your money. You want to think about what a realistic recoupment path is so you can do this again and again and again. And like Roger Corman, you can iterate and give your audience more and more of what they need. I think it's wise not to rely on the festival circuit or traditional sales anymore. I'm seeing more and more of people coming back, and sales are taking longer and longer if they happen at all. So what is a way that you can monetize what you're doing now? I'm thinking about multiple revenue streams, events, screenings, direct sales bundles, membership community, educational licensing or international carve-outs. And ultimately, um, I think the most important aspect of all of this is as much ownership as you can retain, do it. I know that everybody isn't Ryan Coogler and you can't necessarily negotiate that you get reversion after 25 years, but it's in the zeitgeist now that people are talking about, okay, what happens to this movie in 10 years and 25 years? Ryan Coogler is going to get Sinners back. And that ownership is leverage. And that's what you want is you want to develop what they call long tail value conversion. And he's really pioneering that. And I think the more that creators these days and people like the Markipliers of the world who have a big audience, you know, control your email list, control your audience data, control your community. So if you don't control your audience, you're renting your business. And whenever you can, and I know that that is not always possible with global streamers, but if you can retain US digital rights, sequel spinoff rights, remake rights, data rights, whatever rights you can take back for yourself and retain ownership, do it because you will thank yourself in the long run. And just remember that people put a lot of weight on prestige and on going to festivals and making a big sale and having, you know, big fancy accolades. But ultimately, prestige isn't an asset class. Your IP is, your ownership is, and your audience is, and you can do it.
One more point about everything old is new again. George Lucas retained ownership of the first episode of Star Wars, and after that, obviously Fox had the other ones, but they weren't sure that this wasn't a crazy bet. And for him, he knew basically he'd have 5 houses from it for the next 40 years. So the fact is, believe in yourself in that.
So, and to follow up on that, because that all sounds like super dreamy. I'm going to have like great dreams tonight. I'm going to retain ownership of everything. Sterling did it. Steve did it. Allison did it. Michael, you're doing it right now. Me too, man. But so is that because you just have to play hardball and go, that's mine.
Wherever you can,
Everybody's just, yes,
take what you can get.
yes. Yeah. So you need to make that specific. In other words, when you're negotiating, is you have to say, no, you can have this, but this is mine. The rest of this pie is mine.
I think it goes back to what I was saying about Markiplier, which is he knew what was special about what he had. George Lucas knew the licensing was going to be special for what he was making. What I was trying to say is the studios think they know everything, but Sterling's right. They're always looking back. When you're doing something that hasn't been done before, they don't have the precedent to be nervous about it. So you can get away with making an ask of something that you think will be more valuable. I mean, you know, Tracy Ullman paid for all her houses by saying, yeah, you can let The Simpsons have that 3-minute cartoon in my show and give me a part of that. It's always getting a sense of not the traditional ask, but the one that nobody else is thinking about.
I thought I was the only one that knew about the Tracy Ullman show and the Simpsons connection, but no, you know what else too? I would say when you want to do the ask, right? For example, you'll be in a room at some point and you'll be negotiating a contract or something, right? To be quite honest, I didn't even know what I could ask for. I didn't even know what was on the table. I didn't know what the options were. I didn't even know who I was. At the end of the day, in the beginning of the day, rather, I just was trying to get a movie, right? I just wanted someone to hire me as a director for a project so I can be working as a director, right? And then when I finally got into those Hollywood rooms where the deals are being done, right? Where people are exchanging wants and needs and money and naming things, I got to see how it was really done. And I got to see that everything is on the table. Like everything is on the table. And what it really boils down to is, okay, I want to just break it down the entire conversation between executive producers and directors they want to hire, or executive producers who want to finance a film, and you're the person trying to get the film financed. Here's the bottom line, right? What everybody really wants is peace of mind, right? They don't really care if you're extremely talented. They don't truly care if the script is extremely good, right? They really look at it as you might be all those great things, but can you get the job done? Like can you handle $4.5 million within about 6 months' time? Can you deliver your project on time? And are you the guy to get it done? Are you the woman to get it done? And if you can provide that sense of confidence in that, hey, I can get this done, I can ease your mind, I can ease your fears, I can help grow this. That's really the essence of how to close a deal, right? It's not so much about the creative idea. It is that. It truly is that. But at the end of the day, they really want to believe in you. They really want to have confidence in you. And once you can find that alignment within yourself and the idea, you'll be fine, right? I think the magic is knowing that it's not just your one idea that's going to be the thing that takes off and blows up, right? It's probably several ideas. It's probably several ideas. So just know that about yourself, that it's probably a body of work in you somewhere that's probably pretty valuable. So, yeah, trust can definitely overcome the creativity. Yeah, I agree
Love
with
it.
that one. Mhm.
Let me see. Guys, I had a question up here from Sam. So, Steve, he's directing it to you. I keep hearing they spend $200 million so the execs can say they played it, quote, safe. Steve, are you saying that mentality finally is going away?
Three things. One is I exaggerate. Tracy didn't win all that money in the suit. She got 3 million for her show because she didn't win the suit. So fair point. Two is the 200 million is scary today. And I think the three reasons it's scary is he used to say, I'm going to make it all up internationally, and internationally is not as strong as it was 5 years ago. Then they said, doesn't matter international, I'll get it from China. And China is not as strong as it was 5 years ago. And then they said, I'm going to get in the home entertainment window, which basically went away and went to streaming. And the fact of the matter is most of the streaming, most important windows with your own company. So that's how much money you're getting from that is an issue too. So for all those reasons, the way you felt comfortable about your $200 million film wasn't really about the US performance. It was all these other levers, theatrical performance, that aren't there anymore. So yes, they're scared. But I'm going to say that the days of tech companies owning it, F1 with Apple and Project Hail Mary, which everyone says is going to be the big breakout hit. But I didn't even know until this week that it cost $200 million. If it's not going to make money, Apple and Amazon do have trillions of dollars. And two, they're going to tell you that they did just fine on their Apple and Amazon subscriptions that month. It went there, so it made sense. So the playing field's not the same for everyone, but for those non-tech company studios, these bets are 10 times more nerve-wracking than they were just 3 or 4 years ago.
I love it, Allison, how that tags back into what you were saying about, having the diversified portfolio. So, okay, if this $200 million movie didn't make the money, it's okay because we made it up over here with our new whatever
Well,
product.
no, I'll give the example, which is that this weekend Scream made as much as Mission Impossible did.
Wow.
They both opened to 64 million opening weekend. That was the highest Paramount's had in the last 2 years. So the fact of a diversified slate is, your horror film, which probably doesn't cost more than $60 million, may make more than your $200 million film. And so those are the types of things you have to weigh.
Well, there you go, talking about our diversified genre projects than everyone as well. Michael, I need to know more about vertical dramas and using some AI to help us out, even though,
Yeah.
we're not going to dive deep into that though, man,
Yeah,
obviously.
we'll go through this quickly for time, but also I want to say,
We're
Anthony,
good.
you were so spot on. You were saying, you're talking about Roger Corman, it's like in the past, but in a way, is there an example now? And I would look at verticals being that. Like as Allison's saying, he pumped out a lot of content quickly, inexpensively, and got the content out there. I'd say in this day and age, maybe there isn't a filmmaker there, but it is the kind of the verticals that you're seeing there. and they're able to do it quickly. If Dustin, if we can go to the next slide, for those who aren't really familiar with verticals and microdramas, we can actually even have an entire separate, panel about this, and someday, about it. But and I use the term verticals, others call it microdramas, you can call it what you want, but really it's about like how do you make it quickly and cheaply, and you're seeing they're able to do it in 7 to 10 days. They do it in one location, Roger Corman, Allison, in her case study. Um, and we can argue like, okay, is this the model that works? You're talking about how it's, can you make money within the platforms themselves, within the apps where they're coming in from? I think the one thing I just want to leave here for the independent creators is find, like, if you're not into verticals, microdramas, because very often it's they're very specific genres, and they're kind of like, it's funny, I was watching one of them just to understand it, and I was like, I can't believe people watch this, and I'm walking away. I can't believe they do this. I mean, literally 20 minutes later, I'm like, oh my God, I'm saying the same thing, but I'm watching it. Like, it's this weird addiction. Is it great quality? That's up for debate. Um, but the thing is that I'm talking to filmmakers right now and helping them because they're saying, I don't get the money to be able to make an entire series and an entire film. So what they're doing is they're actually using verticals as almost like a case study to showcase and get content out there. Now is it going to make, like we're seeing here, they're going to get it for 3,000, 300,000 K to make it at a time. They're just doing some on their own to have the content to kind of put it out there. And they use that almost as a calling card saying, I've created. I've had a friend of mine who had a script. He just took one scene, did a shot of it for that one scene and put it into shorts, right? Into short film festivals. And so you're seeing this creativity of indie film where you're saying, look, maybe I'm not going to be able to do the entire film right now. So they're either making a short or they're making verticals. And that's kind of like what we wanted to kind of highlight here is like you have these options nowadays where verticals really weren't a thing in the past. Like the streaming, thanks to apps, you're able to make the type of content in your project to showcase it. And it might be just kind of tease content, on it. And we won't go into like how do verticals make their money because it's an entire new topic and a little bit more time. But that's kind of like the key learning I wanted to kind of get it across. And it's true. Is it sustainable? Some people are making money off of it. Some people aren't. But look at vertical as less of a way to get your content out there to be seen as a calling card. That's kind of where I would like want to push it for the independent creators. And there's a bunch. I mean, there's a ton of ecosystems. If you haven't watched any, go to Real Short, go to Drama Box. It's like, and also people are talking about if you raise your own money, your P&A, you put that you control it as a creator, right? Like in the sense that if you put the P&A in it, you find the brands, you find the CPMs to get it, you can actually do make money off of it, but it's not easy. I mean, it's like independent creation. You're going to be really hands-on involved.
Somebody in the chat said, one thing that we'll say about verticals is that it's a good incubator for talent.
Mhm.
The incubator for verticals was TikTok. And TikTok and Instagram Reels is now the new reality series. Like the reality shows now are the 3 minutes of people's lives on TikTok is now the new, and that will become the new trend too to kind of move forward as well.
Yeah.
Great. Let's jump on the next slide if we can. We're groovy on time. We can go a little bit over, but there's a little bit over and then
Yeah,
there's midnight.
yeah, I'll be quick on this one. I'm actually a strategic juror on Soulscape film that's coming out in April. We actually Jen and I put an entire panel in November about AI, and you can watch that. We're going to be posting it shortly on our YouTube channel. But it follows soulscapefilm.com, and the reason we kind of bring it up here is an alternative way to actually get your projects made. You could either make it entirely in AI or use it like if you're in a sci-fi film and you don't have a budget for tens of millions of dollars to do the entire scene, you can actually use AI. I'm seeing a ton of creators now using AI to be able to make a project they never would have been able to get done at a studio ever. And there's so many creators right now that I'm talking to that are like so happy. They're like, oh my God, I could use AI to get my story. Otherwise they're stuck on a script page and no one sees it. Now they actually have their script and their storytellers and their creators and their directors, and they know how to actually get really incredible shots using AI. They're able to get their content out there, and actually they actually do make money. And some are actually not even selling it to the bigger studios and streamers. They're keeping the control and they control the IP, which is important. Again, an entire huge different type of topic, but I think what we wanted to do here with the panel is showcase that there are, for the independent world, there are these solutions, there are these opportunities, there are these distribution methods that you can use that are new in this new day and age. But you also, we're looking back in the past, you can never throw out history, and we're seeing these wonderful case studies, that Steve talked about with Iron Lung, more modern. But in the past, we see Roger Corman as examples there. And AI is just another, look at it as another production tool, another creativity tool for you to have as an opportunity to be able to make your movies and films. So we'll leave it at that, Jen.
Yeah,
Because of
no,
time.
absolutely. I think it speaks well to the point that everybody has been making, that you say, what tools are out there? What resources do I have? How can I be proactive and not just go, okay, I've got my script, and then so often you go, well, now what? Oh, okay, wait, I have all of these other options that did not exist 2 years ago. So awesome. What else can I do with this? So that's kind of where I really appreciate that, because you get stuck in your own train of thought, that one rut down the center of the road, and you forget to look left and right and see what else might be around. So, and again, we got a lot of these in the resources page toward the end, you guys. So, take a picture of that page at the end. We're not there yet, but we're going to show you that at the end. And then, of course, take our survey. So, okay, guys, Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Underserved audience. Okay, we all know what kind of stuff we need to make now for Gen Z and Gen Alpha. All right, tell me more.
We are not making any films for them. And kind of in keeping with the talking about how the pendulum swings back and forth, I am deeply enmeshed in the moms of small children and babies community. And one thing everybody has in common is no devices, no screens. Cocomelon is horrible. We are looking for slow paced content for long form storytelling. And I think that that is a gap in the marketplace right now. Occasionally, they'll make a four quad film that you can go to see with your family, but they are, again, they're over $100 million and they don't recoup. So people think, oh, this doesn't work. But I don't think that's true, because families show up when there are things to see with their kids. And in looking at the data and the responses from Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they do express a willingness. They want long form storytelling, but people have served them mostly shorts. Not that shorts are bad, but I think that they do want the theatrical experience. They want to get off their phones. They want to go see their friends. They want to go have immersive, interesting experiences. They want that community and offline in-person experience. But a lot of it, like theater tickets, keep getting more and more expensive. So this whole new indie, non-D called non-dependent community is coming up with this idea of like micro cinemas in place that can host these low budget films and indie filmmakers. And also, lastly, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, especially Gen Alpha, is expressing that they want franchises that feel like theirs, not remakes of remakes, not of a show in the 80s that they're supposed to like and understand what it is. But things like, I think, where execs do have their kind of mind in the right place is thinking about properties like Roblox and Minecraft. Like, what is an, cool indie game that all the kids are into? Even Five Nights at Freddy's. My little nephew calls it FNAF, and all it's the coolest thing with all the kids at school. So it's keeping your ears to the ground and thinking about, what could be that new franchise that feels like it belongs to these kids and could create an amazing immersive experience and get them off their phones. There's an opportunity there.
Yeah, I think this idea that how are we serving the 5 to 9-year-olds is a missed opportunity, because for years studios said, oh, well, those 3, 4, 5-year-olds will never go to the theater, so don't make a Paw Patrol movie. And then Paw Patrol like blew everybody out of the water, and then they had to think, oh, It's just maybe those parents want to get out of the house and maybe their kids don't
Yes.
want the short form. And this leads up to the only thing that I can say to try to change your pitch, which is stop thinking about story and think about audience sizing and backup. And in the old days, as we talked about, everyone looked at 5 comp films and said, this is how much they made, and so this is how much I'm going to make. We just talked about 10 different ways between YouTube and social sites where you can take the subject matter that you were making your script about and say, this is how many fans it has in all those places. And the point is, it's wrong to think those people are only going to watch there and they're not going to go to the theaters. And when you present, if you present those figures, people are so nervous about even trusting theatrical people are going to go. If you're showing where you can steal back for your topic, you're doing the job for them that they need to greenlight the film, because anyone can argue about the value of your script. It's hard to argue that 40 million people are already doing it in some short form or long form on other formats.
We have a couple more, a next slide that I think is going to be very useful, you guys. The additional questions, we've touched on them in some points, but I've also noticed that there are some questions in the Q&A where they're talking about, okay, yeah, what tools are there that are going to help secure those funding from proof of concept to pilots? So depending on where you're at, okay, look, I've got my script, I've got my deck, I've got my proof of concept, I've written this, I've done this and that. Okay, so what can we use at those different phases to help move it forward, to get that funding or get that distribution, since we're talking about reverse engineering as well? I've stunned everybody.
No, no, I couldn't find my button.
Yeah.
Um, I think it kind of ties into a little bit what Steve just said in terms of thinking about the longevity of the film and the audience around the film itself, right? Now, of course, these are the selling points with the film. Again, I guess I use the term engineering a lot because I also think about the marketing behind the film and potentially the release of the film itself, right? So I use a real world example. So one of the documentaries that I recently sold was about women, and it was about the women of the civil rights movement in America. And, it's a story that we don't always hear about, but as I was pitching the story, it made sense because it aligned with a network initiative around Women's History Month, which was great programming for that. So just knowing that going in, it was more or less like I was retrofitting a piece toward an already projected release window for them. So it was a natural fit. Um, One of the things also I tend to look at too is for larger theatrical, right? Everybody wants, existing IP, right? But then again, there's always this IP fatigue around things, right? Just as a way to get in the door. For example, there's tons of things that can take another look or another revisit again, right? And your idea can be fresher. What I think is really unique is finding things that are approaching their 25th year or their 50th year or beyond, right? Because studios will understand that, and that's already a built-in marketing plan for those studios to say, you know what, this is something right here. This is something right here. Um, not that it matters much, but for example, I have this poster on my wall, which of course is me manifesting another film that I want to try and do. Hallelujah, which of course was released, I think it was 1929, was the first um, film with an all-black cast ever in the history of cinema. In the history of cinema, this is the first film that had an all-black cast. We're coming up on the 100-year anniversary of this film right now. So that alone in conversation, where you have a film that is approaching its 100th year, once again, you've already cleared a lot of legalities in getting the script for the film, and you've already created a lot of enthusiasm and marketing around the release of that film. So that's just one way of thinking about the audience of the film itself in terms of how we're pitching our ideas. Um, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, and thank you guys. Then, okay, I feel we've finished already the next part of the question. Single projects versus slates, managing risks and leverage. We're good on that. Genres that perform best in the indie space. Do we have any more to add
Horror,
on that?
horror, if you want to do indie space or low budget, but horror in general, does very, very well because you don't also, as I think one of the panelists said, you don't really rely upon a really big name star that you have to spend a lot of money, to cover. So, horror is a safe one that you see quite a bit, there and dramas,
And so could we say then, that this horror has the second highest amount of blood ever, Steve? What do you think?
Yeah. That's why. No, their budget went up because of the blood.
Yeah, it doubled. So yeah, we're gonna have the second highest amount of blood in the show. That's our ploy. We could be kind of the Acme version of it. Get a little Wile E. Coyote on the side. I would love it, man. Check it out, you guys. We got some tools and resources. Everybody, this is where you should take a picture. I mean, you'll get it later eventually on the recording, but get it now. I'm loving all of these different things. So Film Stack and Film Substack community, we've got it right there. Other great folks, Eight Above, Stephen Follows, Outside Scoop, Price Point, Ankler, Angle on Producers, Box Office Theory, and the industry. Obviously, I'm going quickly on those because take a picture, click the links, you got that. And it is 8:30. But I could keep going.
I follow a bunch of the film stack community, so feel free to just check, check, check it out, and they're all there. And more.
Fantastic. All right, you guys, powering through. I feel like we've done most of the questions here from the Q&A, and we've really gone through all of them. So will we get copies of the slides afterwards? Nope, because that's our stuff, you guys. But yeah, you'll be able to take notes when it goes up online later, you guys. So yeah, no, those are our proprietary material, but thanks for loving them. Let's check it out. Horror films in development. I love it. I'm looking at some of the chat as well. People are networking like crazy. Well done, y'all. Okay, final questions. Final questions, everybody. Now's your chance.
This really should have been in person because there is a lot of great networking going on and great conversation and great points everyone's making as well too. It's really great panel, Jennifer.
Hey, thank you, man. No, you guys are what make it great. I get to sit here and yeah, I need to get notes taking as well. So I'm very fortunate that I get to have these conversations, you guys. I so appreciate everybody showing up like this. And next time, definitely in person. We're gonna do Indie Part 2. Yeah, everybody's going, yes, can we have in person? Yes, please. We all want that. So, but hey, people got to strike when they got to strike. It's what happens, and rock on, everybody. Okay, everybody, let's put up about did we get a new question?
Yeah, there. Survey.
Great. Woo! Yes, guys, scan that QR code. Please give us your feedback. It's invaluable because we take that seriously. What else do you guys want to talk about? What else do you want to learn about? And check it out because we're looking to gain more corporate partners so that we can continue doing these events and having a blast doing it. But we do need that support. So your feedback is invaluable to say, look, you want to join the team. Yeah, you guys, thank you. Thank you. You guys, this is amazing. Final questions here. It's for females. Sam, female filmmaker, is asking, are there any specific resources for finishing funds and or grants for females? If anybody knows anything offhand. If not, I'm confident there's something within the resources we've put up. So, but if anybody had a specific thing that they love, now's the time. Brian's asking, at what budget level are pre-sales a real strategy? 1 million and above, or does 500,000 get pre-sale opportunities?
It depends on the talent or the director. So if you have attachments, then the sales agent will give you a sense of what their value is in the marketplace.
Fair enough. So the
And
more things change,
sometimes you can actually outweigh that value too. Like the value, it's like a house, right? Sometimes it might be undervalued.
great point. Great point. All right, you guys, this is amazing. Everybody, please do the feedback survey. I'm doing the final check through. I think we got everybody's questions. We're all set. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't wait to do this with you again in person. Rock on. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Sterling. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Dustin and the Writers Guild for as ever being an awesome home. We
And
so
thank you,
appreciate you
Jennifer, for
guys.
moderating it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And
Oh, my pleasure. I get to learn from the best. All right, you guys, have a great night. Be proactive. Check out our channels. Check out all the resources. Let's be successful, everybody. Well done.
Thanks,
bye-bye.
y'all.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
everyone. Bye-bye.